Coming in at number 10, we have Venom's ability to detect members of his symbiote family. Like many other carnivorous, terrifying alien races from beyond the stars, the symbiotes have something similar to a hive mind that, when utilized, allows Venom to know the general location of any symbiotes that originally spawned from him. And while it's not a perfect ability, given the amount of times that other symbiote villains have been able to block Venom's radar, it's still a pretty unique talent that comes in extra handy every time Spider-Man needs help facing another symbiote threat. Coming in at number 9, we have Venom's power of parasitic inheritance. While the Venom movies have recently made it seem like Venom's similar appearance and abilities to Spider-Man are all just a weird coincidence, the comics make it clear that this was anything but. When the Venom symbiote was originally bonded with Peter Parker, it actually inherited some of his spider-based abilities, meaning that Venom will always be able to create webs and use the wall crawler's powers against him. This also means that if the Venom symbiote infects any other superpowered heroes or villains, it can also gain their powers, which honestly has been pretty underutilized in the Marvel universe so far, with the exception of the occasional What If storyline. Coming in at number 8, we have Venom's matter manipulation. Now, everybody knows that Venom is made of weird, icky goop that he can control. It's kind of his most defining trait, and his initial twisted, melted Spider-Man appearance is still iconic to this day. But did you know that this ability is actually way more powerful than you might think? Whenever Flash Thompson took over the role as the symbiote's host, as Agent Venom, he showcased the ability to use bits of his symbiote essence as a projectile weapon or bullet, and then using his manipulation abilities on the bullet to tear an enemy apart from the inside out. Definitely not the nicest way to take out a villain, but hey, he's still Venom, so you gotta have a little bit of anti in that anti-hero.
Number 7. Superior Carnage. This version of Carnage came about when the symbiote was forcefully separated from a currently brain-dead Cletus Kasady by the Wizard. The symbiote refused to surrender to the Wizard's will, and so he had to remove the symbiote via blood transfusion, giving the blood to another unwilling participant, his ally Dr. Carlin Malice. Dr. Malice then became Carnage against his own wishes and became Wizard's loyal pet of sorts, making the Wizard's new Frightful Four pretty powerful, which of course is what he intended. That is of course until he lost control of Carnage, who ended up bonding with the Wizard instead, which also the Wizard was not down for, but that's how Carnage do sometimes. In the end, Superior Carnage would end up returning to Cletus once more, who was thought of as dead at this point, but it was revealed that he actually had survived an explosion that he was in, but was just really badly burnt. Because Cletus Kasady is pretty much impossible to kill, apparently. Even when he's dead, he's probably not dead.
Coming in at number 6, we have Venom's all-natural tracker beacons. Another addition to his moveset during the Flash Thompson / Agent Venom era, Venom didn't need to rely on technology or GPS when trying to track down one of his targets. By using the same ability that allows him to know the location of his offspring, Agent Venom was capable of sticking a piece of his own symbiote self onto others and then track them down as if he'd placed a literal beacon on themselves. It might be crude, low-tech, and a lot goopier than your usual method of tracking, but you really can't argue with the results.
Number 5. Secret Symbiotic Dimension. When the first symbiote suit appeared, it was revealed to have a super random power. It could store things by accessing a pocket dimension. This was delved into after its origins were revealed in Secret Wars, and we began to learn more about its abilities. Apparently the suit has access to its own pocket dimension. It's uncertain as to whether other symbiotes share this ability with Venom, or as to if we will ever see that power used again, as it pretty much only came up when it was being introduced to us, and then it was never really mentioned or referred to again. It's been a while since people have brought that up, so.
Coming in at number 4, we have Venom's ability to merge with inanimate objects. That's right, we all know that symbiotes are easily capable of bonding with other organic life forms, whether they be human or alien, but a rarely seen ability of the symbiote race is that they can bond with inanimate objects if the need ever arises for survival. In one particularly notable instance, the Venom symbiote once combined itself with a broken down car so that it would have a body capable of moving throughout the city, repairing the car with its own tendrils to make it fully operational. Nay, I guess it beats a mechanic's bill.
Number 3. Carnage, Earth 20143. This alternate version of Carnage gave Spider-Man some massive trouble back in 2019's Spider-Verse in issue number 2. She also happened to act as Spider-Man's evil alter ego, as she herself, instead of becoming an alternate version of Spider-Man, became an alternate version of villain Carnage. Ooh. Carnage of Earth 20143 is also an alternate version of Aunt May. Instead of just being a kind, charitable, sweet, yet no-nonsense caregiver or hero, she becomes instead a ruthless and heartless villain who believed free will did not exist and aimed to destroy all of her counterparts throughout the multiverse, as well as the counterparts of her allies. She fought alongside likewise evil yet non-super versions of her nephew Peter and her husband Ben, as well as an evil version of Miles Morales from her reality, who is still Miles Morales, so I believe he still had powers. Spider-Man had to harness the power of all of her superpowered alternates using the power of love from across the multiverse in order to defeat this Carnage. It was pretty intense, and we got to see a lot of alternate, I guess, Spider-Mams. There's like a Spider-Gwen, there's like a Venom, it's crazy.
Coming in at number 2, we've talked about symbiotes merging with inanimate objects, but what about the internet? That's right, in probably the most 90s possible storyline of all time, Venom and Carnage brought their endless back and forth struggle for dominance into the digital age, with this comic making canon that symbiotes can manipulate their molecules to such a tiny degree they can slip into the molecules that make up the internet data stream. Now, I'm not an IT guy, but I'm pretty sure that's not how the internet works. However, if you experience any technical glitches with this video, it's totally because Venom and Carnage are just punching each other in between the pixels of your screen. This power was so weird that it hasn't made a reappearance since, but it definitely is one of the more memorable Venom storylines. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have Venom's most recent power-up, but also potentially his weirdest, with symbiote time vision. Following the defeat of the symbiote god Krull, Eddie Brock and his symbiote have taken Krull's place as the symbiote leader. With this great responsibility comes a lot of great power, including the ability to not just merge with any symbiote throughout space, but throughout time as well, meaning any symbiote, past or future, can be suddenly seen through the eyes of Eddie Brock. With Eddie initially being completely overwhelmed by the disorienting process, this is a power that may take some time to properly wield, but could just be Venom's strongest gift of all.
Number 10. Carnage, Earth 7642. This alternate version of Carnage comes to us from the Spider-Man and Batman team-up comic. He hails from Earth 7642, an alternate Earth where New York City's Spidey and his foes and Gotham City's Batman and his foes both coexist. Carnage in this reality was cured of his insanity, violent and homicidal tendencies by being implanted with an inhibitor chip. However, this chip was disabled by his symbiote, returning him to normal. Escaping captivity, he managed to successfully kidnap Joker, who also had an inhibitor chip, keeping him sane. Cletus disabled Joker's chip and proposed a team up, but the two villains unfortunately couldn't agree on a method when it came to how to terrorize. Joker wanted something more elaborate in a scheme, whereas Carnage just wanted, well, Carnage. In the end, Carnage was defeated in an interesting turn of events by the uncoordinated efforts of both Joker and Batman. Number 9. Carnage, Earth 311. Carnage of Earth 311 was known by the name Canis Cassidy. He claimed to be possessed not by a symbiote but by what he referred to as a demon. Earth 311 is the reality belonging to Marvel's 1602 universe created by Neil Gaiman. This alternate version of Carnage, however, was not a creation of Mr. Gaiman himself, but instead was created by Mike Costa and David Baldione, making his first appearance as a side character in one of the stories included in 2015's The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 1. In fact, I think that's his only appearance thus far. He was the leader of the Sinister Sextet, who were admittedly pretty handily defeated by the Web Warriors in said story. However, it should be noted that the Sinister Sextet therefore went up against not one Spider-Man, woman, or totem, but instead 5 of them. Number 8. Carnage, Earth 1610. Carnage in the Ultimate Universe has no attachment to its usual host Cletus Cassidy. The symbiote is not alien in origin, but instead, like Venom in this universe, was created in a lab. The creature was made out of samples left over from Richard Parker's experiments, combined with Peter's unique DNA. Carnage, when unleashed, would end up being a monster who ultimately killed Gwen Stacy due to it possessing fragments of Peter's memories. It needs to consume humans in order to survive in the beginning, but otherwise had powers similar similar to its 616 counterpart. It could shapeshift and was considered to be immensely strong. However, it also possesses a unique ability as well. It was able in essence to recreate the deceased Gwen Stacy, producing a clone of her. This clone was permanently bonded to the symbiote and herself would become known as Carnage. The only downside as well was that as clone Gwen was frightened of Carnage, her powers were unstable and unpredictable. The good news is though, Carnage when bonded with Gwen basically didn't need to eat humans anymore for some reason, so yay! And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more Carnage lists as we prepare for this movie, which is coming out at the end of the month, at the beginning of October, I am so excited! Be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. And let us know in the comments if you're excited about Let There Be Carnage. I'm excited. I have faith in Woody Harrelson, so I'm pretty excited about it. Number 7. Just a costume. Originally the black and white suit that we would later come to know as the Venom symbiote, who would set us down the path of symbiote mania once it became popular, was just that, a suit. It wasn't sentient at all initially. At least, it didn't seem that way. The suit seemed to be intended more as an update to Spider-Man's look. In fact, the issue where it's introduced says the rumors are true in regards to his new suit. However, the suit was received poorly by fans who complained that they missed Peter Parker's classic red and blue, and it was likely the fans' reaction that prompted Marvel to think of a plot to help Parker ditch the new look. The suit was first introduced in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, Issue 252 in May 1984, but it wouldn't be till December of that same year in Marvel Superhero Secret Wars Issue 8 that the backstory of the suit would even be explained, and it was only once we knew it was sentient that Marvel began the plot explaining why Peter wanted the suit gone, allowing him to return to his more popular classic look, and allowing the suit to then bond with Eddie Brock and go on to become the insanely popular Venom symbiote that we know today. Number 6. Red Goblin. Red Goblin might not have additional powers like some of the other alternates on this list, but he does add additional psychopathic tendencies, not that Carnage needed any more of those, and smarts. Red Goblin is what you get when you put two of Spider-Man's main arch nemeses, Norman Osborn and Carnage, together, and boy is he really ruthless. This gave us a version of the symbiote who almost got Peter Parker to quit being Spider-Man in order to protect his loved ones against Red Goblin. Red Goblin basically threatened to devour said allies and family members of Peter if he did not revoke the Spider-Man mantle. And if you can believe it, Peter agreed. However, Peter did not stop fighting, he just did so not as Spider-Man but instead as Peter. So he was like, I'm not gonna do it, and everyone was like, and then the next issue he was like, I'm gonna do it as Peter, it's fine. Though of course, even as Peter Parker, he still had superpowers and he called in backup to help. I think he just wasn't wearing his mask, he may have even still been wearing his Spider-Man suit. I mean, with someone like Red Goblin, you're also gonna need all that help, so it's probably good that he called in the cavalry, if you will. Norman's time as Red Goblin ended up driving him even more crazy, and in the end left Norman thinking he was actually Cletus Cassidy for a while. I think he's back to normal now. Pretty sure he's back to normal now. I mean, normal. What is normal for Norman?
Coming in at number 5, we have one of the newer abilities on this list, the power of flight. First manifesting after Eddie and Venom's first encounter with Krull, the god of all symbiotes, Venom had apparently been hiding his ability to sprout a pair of blood-red dragon wings the entire time, a symbol of Krull's impressive symbiote dragons. However, when you're already capable of swinging, climbing walls, and even breathing in the vacuum of space, the ability to fly just isn't quite as impressive as it would be on a character that was stuck on the ground up until this point. Ah well, giant symbiote wings, you still look rad as hell to me.
Number 4. BIZARRO. BIZARRO is the amalgam version of Carnage who is seemingly combined with BIZARRO in this universe. BIZARRO is Project Cadmus's attempt to recreate alien DNA. Sound familiar? Unfortunately, it didn't go as smoothly as planned, and instead they ended up creating the crystalline monster known as BIZARRO. BIZARRO possesses the powers of Carnage vs 616 and can bond with other beings. It also is quite adept at evading attacks and possesses hyper intelligence. BIZARRO is a foe of Spider-Boy, himself a combination of Spider-Man and Superboy. Spider-Man from Marvel, Superboy from DC. Number 3. Self-partnered. I don't need no host. When symbiotes were originally introduced in comics, they were shown as needing to bond to a host to survive. If they didn't have one, they would basically starve and die. Since then, this interpretation in comics has changed. While symbiotes enjoy bonding with a host, as it keeps them well fed and gives them purpose and companionship, they don't actually need to anymore, unlike the Venom movie where we saw like those Those symbiotes seem to need someone. They won't starve, they won't die. Through retcons it has been clarified that without a host, they'll pretty much just be fine. In fact, when the sleeper symbiote was born, Venom and Eddie decided to hold off on having it bond to anyone, worrying that it would be corrupted and deciding that more time for it to fully develop before bonding with its first host would be better. Which means the symbiotes who said they were starving in the 80s and 90s when they weren't bonded were actually kind of just being drama queens apparently. Number 2. Spider Carnage animated. Definitely one of the most horrifying versions of Carnage out there as well. This version of Carnage comes to us from Spider-Man the animated series from the 90s. He is an alternate reality version of Peter Parker who lost both his Aunt May and his Uncle Ben, oh no, causing him to go to a very dark place. In his own reality, he would later bond with Carnage, who had entered his Earth through an interdimensional portal. Due to all the tragedy that he'd suffered, Peter as Spider Carnage became corrupted and set out to destroy all of reality. Once foiled, he headed to another reality to try again, but this time was redeemed by the main animated continuity Spider-Man, who teamed up with a still alive alternate reality version of Uncle Ben. Together they were able to reach out, reawaken, and remind Spider Carnage of the goodness still inside him. Unable to rid himself of the symbiote, however, Spider Carnage opted to sacrifice himself in order to ensure everyone's safety. Number 1. Carnage Cosmic. In the Realityverse 616, Norrin Rad ended up coming into contact with the Carnage symbiote, who bonded to him, abandoning his host Cletus Cassidy. But in Marvel's What If Volume 2 issue 108, it all goes down a little bit differently. Instead of the symbiote returning to Cletus, in this What If reality of Earth 985, Carnage remained bonded to the Silver Surfer, permanently becoming the Carnage Cosmic. Sort of permanently anyways. So not only does this version of Carnage have all the power it usually possesses as a symbiote and child of Venom, but it also has access to the Silver Surfer's power cosmic as well. Of course, in the end, this version of Carnage is defeated, but only when Silver Surfer manages to regain some control long enough to fly himself and the symbiote, now permanently bonded with him, into the sun. Cry a little tear for Carnage Cosmic. Number 10. Digital form. In the Carnage Unleashed saga, we learned that not only can a symbiote shapeshift, but beyond that it can also become digitized. How this works? Well, no one really knows. It wasn't really explained. We've only really seen it utilized within that story itself. Cletus Cassidy managed to use this random ability while merged with the Carnage symbiote to flow into his computer screen, through it, and out a different screen, moving through some sort of online network, I assume. Cassidy used this skill to terrorize players of the Carnage video game, which was made with Cletus's blessing. Obviously for somewhat sinister purposes, because then he used it to kind of go around and kill people. In the end, Venom has to fight him on this new digital plane, or as Carnage refers to it, Electric Candyland Hoo-Haville. Oh, the 90s. 9. Here Boy. Last year was created by the Life Foundation, who captured Venom and forced it to procreate, forcibly extracting 5 children from the symbiote. Last year was one of these 5. After its current human host died, who it was bonded to along with 3 other symbiotes at the same time, together they were known as Hybrid, Last year ended up used by the US military. Due to the trauma that the symbiote had experienced when it was forcibly separated from the other 3 symbiotic members that made up Hybrid, it and the other 3 symbiotes were unable to fully bond with a host. So instead, it got bonded with a war dog and became this freaky looking dog symbiote thing. Imagine having a symbiote dog for a pet. Probably be pretty useful actually. Number 8. Carnage kills Venom. David Michelinie and Eric Larson were the creators of Carnage. When Michelinie actually pitched his idea for the character to Marvel, it was all about creating a version that was complete sociopath, one with no moral or ethical principles, unlike Eddie Brock's Venom. In fact, if he had got his way, Eddie Brock would have died, and Venom would have moved on to a different host. In other words, Venom would have actually become what we know Carnage to be today, and we basically have no character like Venom. I mean, we would have Venom, but it would be basically Carnage. You know what I mean? Fortunately, Venom was so popular that Marvel decided they didn't want to go exactly with Michelinie's full plan, instead deciding to use his creation as a secondary symbiote character and introducing Venom and Eddie Brock's nemesis, Carnage, as bonded to serial killer Cletus Cassidy. And that's how we have Carnage today. What? Could you imagine though if they killed Venom? Oh my goodness.
Coming in at number 7, we have Venom's poisonous bite. That's right, you'd think it would be obvious from having a name like Venom, but this symbiote's fangs aren't just for show. They contain a special form of symbiote poison that's been shown to be even deadlier than that of a snake's. With the teeth on Venom only being developed at Eddie Brock's command, this ability hasn't been showcased too often in the comics, but does make a surprise recurrence every now and then when Eddie needs to get out of a tight situation. In fact, the poison on Venom's bite is so strong that Sandman once lost his ability to hold his form for a time because he was bitten. And this is a dude that's literally made out of sand. Just imagine what teeth like those would do to a regular person, and maybe it's a good thing that Venom often forgets to chew his food.
Number 6. Bonded with BIZARRO. Sort of. In Amalgam Comics Spider-Boy issue number 1, we got to see an imagining of what it would be like if BIZARRO from DC and Carnage from Marvel bonded together. And we got BIZARRNAGE. What a great name, BIZARRNAGE. BIZARRNAGE, however, was not actually comprised of these two characters, but simply represented the what if of the two villains getting together. So you'll notice that he speaks oddly but not quite like BIZARRO, and happens to have a lot of abilities similar to Carnage, and a similar symbiotic look to him, although where Carnage is bloody red, BIZARRNAGE is bone white. Number 5 is Spider-Carnage Earth 616. While in the animated Spider-Man series we had a character who also went by this name, in the comics it was a different host entirely who went as Spider-Carnage, Ben Reilly. Spider-Carnage was the name that the symbiote took when it bonded with Ben Reilly after temporarily being bonded to John Jameson. However, this was all just a ruse. The symbiote didn't really want to actually be attached to Jameson, but instead wanted to find a host worthy of it. As soon as it seemed Ben was defeating John as Carnage, the symbiote jumped onto him. Even though John was trying to warn him, he's like, "Don't fight me, it's a trap." Ben Reilly tried to resist but failed and temporarily became the now superpowered and symbiotic character known as Spider-Carnage. This all went down in Amazing Spider-Man issue 410 of the original volume. However, this was the peak of 90s Spider-Man, so you'd have to move over to the just Spider-Man series to continue his story, because that's how it was back then. There were so many Spider-Man comics. They were like, read this issue, then read this other series, then read the other series, and you were like, what's happening? Number 4. Fusion. I love that Fusion has just become such a huge nerd thing. Almost every form of fandom has like some form of fusion at some point involved in its characters or its story. When I am talking about fusion with symbiotes, by the way, I'm not talking about symbiosis between a symbiote and its host. I'm talking about symbiotes full on fusing together. We saw this happen when Hybrid was created, who I was talking about earlier with the Lasher. Lasher was one of the 4 symbiotes involved in it. The other were also offspring of Venom, Riot, Phage, and Agony. These 4 symbiotes fused when Scream killed their hosts. Scream was actually the 5th child of Venom to be extracted by the Life Foundation. When bonded with the host, the fused symbiotes each speak to that host. In other words, you would constantly have multiple voices and personalities in your head, not just one, not just the one of the one symbiote you're bonded to. Hybrid is also capable of creating smaller versions of itself by detaching parts of itself, and it can like send those off. It absorbs chemicals and can spit acid, and it is even capable of flight through shapeshifting to have wing-like appendages. Now this doesn't seem that crazy, but at the time, that was pretty crazy, because Venom I think can do that now too, but apparently wings are a hard thing to make. Took people a while to get there.
Coming in at number 3, we have Venom's healing ability. Now, healing abilities aren't exactly rare in the Marvel universe, and Venom's can do everything you would expect from the gift. Cuts get healed over, broken bones are fixed in place, and any limbs lost can be easily regenerated. However, there's one aspect of Venom's healing that seems to go beyond that of even Wolverine. When Eddie Brock found out that he'd contracted cancer, the Venom symbiote was able to slow the cancer's spread and eventually healed the entire affliction. Curing cancer? That's definitely outside the realm of usual superhero powers, and something Venom definitely doesn't bring up enough.
Number 2. Do-gooders. Time for your daily Klyntar history lesson. Did you know that symbiotes were originally good guys? Or at least they were chronologically. Well, Venom quickly became a Spider-Man villain of the 80s and 90s, prompting everyone to want more and more symbiotes, leading us to characters like Carnage and Anti-Venom. As of 2015, we found out that actually symbiotes never intended to be bad guys. So that villainous Venom image that we have in our mind is no longer relevant really at all. And actually they prefer to be called Klyntar, which also happens to be the name of the planet that they originate from, because they also kind of like are the planet. Anyways, in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Brian Michael Bendis decided to write a history lesson for us in regards to the Klyntar's true intention, which we got to see when the Guardians bonded with the planet. Basically, the Klyntar are inherently good, seeking to help those across the galaxy who need it. No matter where they are connected to the hive mind, unless they become corrupted by an imperfect host, which was what we saw happen in the case of Venom merging with Eddie Brock. Eddie Brock was not a perfect host. We got to see the bad side of that symbiote. Though at this point, Venom had already been cut off from the hive mind of Klyntar, meaning that it had already lost its way, so it was already kind of twisted and evil when it came across Eddie. So as long as Klyntar select the right host, they actually get to stay connected and be what they had intended, heroes. Of course, before all of this in Klyntar history, there was Null, who controlled and used the Klyntar for evil means, but we wouldn't find this all out until about 2018. Just retcons on retcons, folks. Still, I like the idea of Klyntar being good guys, wanting to redeem themselves. I love when people redeem themselves in comics. Number 1. Human Hybrid. In the Absolute Carnage event, we got to see Eddie and Ann's son Dylan achieve symbiosis with his symbiote brother, Sleeper. Sleeper is one of the many offspring of Venom and Eddie who have created a pretty decent sized brood of symbiote babies during their time together at this point. The crazy thing about these two bonding was that it allowed Dylan to learn something dark about himself. It turns out, because the Venom symbiote was somewhat involved in his conception, that Dylan is actually a hybrid of symbiote and human. And when he bonds with Sleeper, he learned what this means in terms of the abilities that it grants him. He is able to dominate symbiotes. While bonded with Sleeper, he finds himself able to control the symbiote in a way that most people can't do at all. He also has the power to forcibly reject them and even to completely blast a symbiote apart just by looking at it. So yeah.